Welcome to the Sleep Narrator. I know you use these videos to drift off into slumber, so before you close your eyes, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Also, let me know where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind wander as I tell you a story. Rourke sat behind his desk, staring through the blinds at the city that had lied to him for a decade. The photo lay in front of him. Same girl, same tragedy. But this one wasn't post-mortem. She was alive, breathing, laughing. Maybe the faintest trace of a smile ghosted across her face. He lit another cigarette, the fourth since sunrise. It came through internal mail. Miles finally said. No return address. Dropped in last night. No witnesses. Just that and a note. He handed over the paper. Old typewriter font. Uneven alignment. No signature. You missed something. Come see for yourself. 3062. Rourke exhaled smoke through his nose. Orange Drive. He knew it. A boarding house. Low rent. Long shadows. Creaky floorboards and dreams gone sour. He grabbed his coat. Tell records to pull everything we have on that address. Already did, Miles said. You're not gonna like it. Rourke's Buick growled as it rolled through narrow streets slick with rain. Street lamps blinked like tired eyes. The city was half asleep, but he was wide awake. Orange Drive hadn't changed. Still smelled like mildew and gasoline. He parked across the street and watched the house for a minute. 2 stories, peeling paint, one light on upstairs. He stepped out, adjusting his hat against the drizzle, and climbed the porch steps.
A knock, a pause, then a voice, soft and raspy. It's open.
The door creaked. Inside, it smelled like mothballs and bourbon. A woman sat in a velvet chair by the fireplace. She wore a robe too fine for the room and makeup that couldn't hide how much she'd aged. Detective Rourke, she said. You haven't changed a bit. He blinked. Do I know you? You knew my sister. He paused. Elizabeth, she said. And just like that, the ghosts came pouring in again. Her name was Noir Short. Younger by 3 years, but the years hadn't been kind. She gestured to the chair across from her. Rourke sat, his trench coat damp and heavy. The fire snapped softly between them. I didn't come to reopen wounds, he said. But someone did, she replied, pouring 2 glasses of rye from a bottle near her feet. That photo, that note, it's starting again. Rourke studied her. The way her fingers trembled slightly, the way her eyes refused to meet his for too long. You said you never knew much, he began. I lied, she cut in. The air thickened. Nora took a drink and lit a cigarette. I always thought if I stayed quiet, it would go away. But silence doesn't bury the past. It feeds it. She opened a drawer beside the fireplace and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, letters, faded photographs, matchbooks from long-gone clubs. One photo caught Rourke's eye. Elizabeth in a black dress, arm around a man whose face was crossed out in ink. I found these a few weeks ago, Nora said. They were hidden in our mother's sewing kit. Rourke pulled the photo closer. You recognize him? I've tried to forget him. Name? She hesitated. Then, Vincent Carraway. He ran with the studio crowd. Elizabeth was wrapped around his finger. Rourke leaned back. The name stirred something. Old rumors. A police report long buried. Nora handed him another envelope. She wrote him letters. I didn't read them all. Just enough to know she was scared near the end. He opened it. One letter, dated January 11th. Then I'm tired of running. I know what I saw. You told me to forget it. I can't. I won't. If something happens to me, it's on you. Rourke folded the letter carefully. The ghosts were gathering fast. He stood. I'll find him. Nora's voice was low. If you do, be careful. Some men kill to stay forgotten. Vincent Carraway. The name echoed through the precinct's walls like a piano chord gone sour. Rourke leaned over the records desk, watching the clerk thumb through reels of microfilm and yellowed files. He was a producer, the clerk muttered. Low-budget stuff, crime serials, got run out of Paramount in '46. No one ever said why. Rourke lit a cigarette and stared at the faded photo on the desk. Caraway, with a sharp jawline and a smile that never reached his eyes. He's still in town, the clerk shrugged. Last known address was up in the hills. Franklin Canyon. Off the grid for years. Rourke took the file and stepped into the sunlight, squinting through the haze of heat and exhaust. The city sprawled beneath him, a patchwork of secrets under painted skies. Franklin Canyon was where the money lived. Or used to. Caraway's place sat like a forgotten film set. Stucco walls, sun-faded shutters, and a mailbox that leaned like it was tired of standing. Rourke knocked twice. No answer. He circled to the back and found the door cracked open. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and memories. Film canisters lined the shelves, dust-covered scripts, a reel-to-reel player humming low, like a whisper too soft to catch. And in the center of the room, a wall of photographs. Not just Elizabeth, other women, dozens. Headshots, candid shots, nightclub snapshots, notes scribbled in red ink. He stepped closer, recognized one. A girl found dead in '48. Same MO carved, cleaned, left like a message. It wasn't just Elizabeth. Jesus, he whispered. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. Rourke spun, gun drawn. A man stood in the shadows, arms raised, tall, gaunt, hollow-eyed. "Don't shoot," he rasped. "You're too late." Rourke stepped closer. "Vincent Caraway?" He nodded, then pointed to the wall. "They told me to stop. Years ago, but I kept looking. Thought I could fix it. Thought I could end it." His voice broke. "But they're still out there, detective. And they're watching." Rourke didn't lower the gun. Caraway was a shell of a man. His skin sagged like old paper, his eyes deep wells of regret. "They?" Rourke asked. Caraway nodded toward the wall of photos. "It wasn't just me looking, wasn't just her they wanted quiet." Elizabeth stumbled into something. A name. A room she wasn't supposed to see. He walked to a drawer beneath the reel-to-reel player and pulled out a film canister. "I kept this," he said. "They missed it." "What is it?" "Proof." Rourke took the canister. No label, just a smudge of ink on the metal lip. "They used to meet at the Florentine Club," Caraway muttered. "Powerful men. The kind who don't like their secrets making headlines." She thought if she took a picture, told someone, it'd stop them. He laughed, dry and hollow. "She didn't know the city like I did." Rourke slid the film into his coat. "You're coming with me." Caraway shook his head. "Won't make it past the corner." Footsteps echoed outside, too measured to be casual, too soft to be welcome. Rourke moved to the window. A black car, idling. "We've got to move." Caraway didn't budge. They always clean up their mess. Rourke turned toward him, but the man was already lowering into the chair, eyes closed, tired, resigned. The front door creaked. Rourke slipped out the back, the film canister tight in his fist. He didn't look back. The projection room at the station hadn't been used in years. Dust blanketed the chairs. The walls were yellow with time. Rourke wiped down the old projector, fed the reel through the guides, and killed the lights. The film crackled to life. At first, nothing. Then, shapes, shadows. A party, dimly lit. A woman in pearls laughing. Elizabeth. The camera panned, slowly, deliberately across the room. Men in tuxedos, faces half in light, half hidden. One stood out, broad-shouldered, cigar in hand. Senator Malcolm Varnett. Rourke leaned forward. Varnett had denied ever meeting Elizabeth, publicly, repeatedly. But here he was, in motion, smiling. The film ended abruptly. No credits, just a white screen. Rourke rewound the reel and sat in the dark. He didn't trust many. Not the papers, not half the brass upstairs, and especially not anyone tied to state politics. He needed backup. Someone quiet. Someone clean. He lit a cigarette and made the call. Dispatch? Go ahead. This is Rourke. Get me Detective Claire Devlin. Tell her it's about the Dahlia. He hung up, the receiver heavy in his hand. If Farnett was in that room, then the rot ran deeper than anyone thought. And Elizabeth didn't die because of who she was. She died because of what she saw. Rourke waited on the precinct's rooftop, the city stretching wide beneath a sky bruised with dusk. Claire Devlin arrived 20 minutes later, coat collar turned high, eyes sharp. Didn't think I'd hear this name again, she said, lighting a cigarette from his match. Didn't think I'd call, Rourke answered. They stood in silence as the wind toyed with her scarf. Below them, cars hissed along Sunset, neon humming to life. I've got film, he said, handing her a still frame. She was there, and so was Vernet. She didn't react, not visibly, but her fingers stiffened around the picture. You sure? I watched it twice. I'd know that cigar-chewing grin anywhere. Claire pocketed the photo. Then you're already being watched. Wouldn't be the first time. She hesitated, then asked, You think this goes back to the club? The Florentine? Yeah. Rourke nodded. Carraway said it was their ground zero. Secret meetings, blackmail fodder, more than one scared girl. Claire exhaled slowly. I knew someone who worked the kitchen there. Said men in suits came in, took the whole back room. Nobody else allowed. She got fired for looking through the wrong door. Think she'd talk? She's gone. Died in 52. Jumped off a rooftop downtown. Rourke closed his eyes for a moment. How many people has this city buried in silence? Claire looked him dead on. Enough to keep the powerful powerful. Rourke stepped away from the ledge. We find out what Elizabeth saw. We find the room, the night, the guests, and we burn this thing from the roots. Claire nodded. I'll pull old permits, get names tied to the Florentine's liquor license. And Rourke, he looked at her. Watch your back. He smiled, dry, always do. They parted without goodbye. The night crawled in, slow and dangerous. And somewhere in the city, a truth waited to be exhumed. The Florentine Club sat just off La Brea, buried behind a row of pawn shops and forgotten theaters. From the outside, it was nothing. A crumbling stucco building with boarded windows, a sun-faded sign that hadn't lit up in years, and a rusted security gate chained shut. But to anyone with memory and to those who had something to hide, it was sacred ground. Rourke and Claire arrived just after midnight, dressed like trouble but moving like ghosts. Rourke had bribed a city inspector for a skeleton key, and the lock gave with a stubborn click. They stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and mold. Chairs lay overturned, the bar splintered and dry, but the bones of the place were intact. Velvet wallpaper peeled in strips. Crystal sconces hung like wilting flowers. There was a grand piano in the corner, its ivory keys yellowed with disuse. Claire walked the perimeter while Rourke moved toward the back, flashlight beams slicing through decades of grime. This place feels wrong, Claire said, her voice echoing. Rourke nodded, like a stage where everyone forgot their lines. He stopped before a double door, its brass handles dulled with time. The private room. He opened it slowly. Inside, a round table, long abandoned. Cigarette butts still curled in glass trays. A single leather-bound chair faced the far wall, as if someone had once held court there. Claire moved to a cabinet, pried it open. Inside were scraps, napkins with lipstick stains, business cards from exclusive law firms, a film negative curled and brittle with age. Rourke stared at the table. It wasn't just a place to drink. It was where decisions were made. Fates decided. He walked to the wall behind the chair. His flashlight caught the edge of a panel, a false back. With effort, he pulled it free. Behind it, tucked into the hollow space, was a box. Heavy, locked. Claire stepped beside him. You think it's what she saw? I think it's what they killed her over. They didn't open it there. Not in that room. Some things were too sacred or too dangerous to unearth beneath that rotten ceiling. Back at the precinct, they worked under the buzzing glow of a desk lamp. The lock took time. Claire's tools were quiet, precise. Rourke kept watch, eyes flicking to the windows every few minutes. When the latch gave, they opened the lid. Inside, a thick ledger of names, dates, dollar amounts, a stack of undeveloped negatives, a reel of film in a marked tin. Florentine. Claire flipped through the ledger. Judges, cops, actors, politicians, she murmured. Payments, schedules, blackmail. Rourke leaned in. This isn't just dirt, it's a map. Claire looked at him. It's a noose. They sat in silence, the weight of it settling over them. Rourke lit a cigarette. Elizabeth didn't stand a chance, did she? No, Claire said, but maybe we do. Outside, the city turned in its sleep, and far beneath its bright lights, the darkness stirred. The following morning, the city looked cleaner than it had a right to. Rain had rinsed the streets overnight, leaving the sidewalks shining and the alleys smelling faintly of old copper and wet newspaper. But the air was still thick with lies, and Rourke knew the moment the sun hit the ledger on his desk that they were standing on the edge of something big, something dangerous. Claire arrived with 2 coffees and a file tucked under her arm. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Neither of them had slept. Started matching the names, she said. Most of them are nobodies. Launderers, fixers, guys you'd never look at twice. But a few, well, she slid the file across the desk. Rourke flipped it open. Senator Malcolm Varnett, District Attorney Gerald Klein, former LAPD Chief Lawrence Hayes, each name marked with a date and a dollar figure. You think this ledger connects them all to the club? Claire nodded. And probably to each other. Payments went in. Girls came out. Some never came back. Rourke leaned back. And Elizabeth wasn't just in the wrong place, she said. She was a piece they couldn't control. They spent the next 6 hours cross-referencing files, chasing down aliases, building a wall of names, photos, and red string in the precinct's records room. Claire paused over one photograph, a tall man in uniform smiling beside a young woman in a diner booth. Who's that? Rourke asked. Captain Hayes. That's from 43. Woman's unnamed. Rourke frowned. She looks familiar. He grabbed an old crime scene photo of Elizabeth, overlaid the faces. Similar jawline. Same nose. She's family. Claire blinked. A sister? Or a mother? Claire rifled through the birth records. Here, Elizabeth Short, born Boston, 1924. Mother Phoebe May Short. No siblings. Not on paper, Rourke muttered. But what if she was Hayes's daughter? Claire raised an eyebrow. And he covered it up. Or she never knew. But someone else did. They sat in silence. Then, Claire tapped the file. There's one name that doesn't belong here. Payment came from out of state. New York address. No local ties. Yet they made 3 separate transfers, each tagged with the initials BD. Rourke froze. BD. Black Dahlia. He exhaled slowly. Let's pay them a visit. By dusk, they were packed. Gun, camera, copies of the ledger pages, and the film reel stowed in Rourke's coat. Claire drove. The Pontiac rumbled beneath them like a sleeping animal. The address led them to a warehouse outside the city, low and square near the train lines. A faint hum vibrated through the walls. Generators, maybe, or printing presses. Claire picked the lock. Rourke stepped in first. Inside, rows of file cabinets, industrial shelving, black and white photos clipped to strings overhead. The whole place reeked of ink, oil, and old ambition. A man stepped out of the shadows. Trim, neat, wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't flinch. You're early, he said. Name? Rourke barked. Walt Trimble. I process the documents. I don't ask who sends them. Claire showed him the ledger. You touch this? He nodded. Only to scan it. Everything gets backed up. Where's the backup? Trimble pointed to a metal cabinet. Claire opened it. Dozens of reels, negatives, copies of every transaction. Rourke stared. This is their vault. Trimble smiled weakly. It was safer than banking. Until now. A shot rang out. Trimble dropped. Claire ducked. Rourke spun, weapon drawn. Another figure, hat low, coat high, bolted through the back door. Rourke chased him into the night. The darkness swallowed everything, the buildings, the alleys, the footprints. But the truth had already escaped. Claire stood in the warehouse, eyes on the dead man, fingers trembling over the fresh blood soaking through his shirt. Behind her, the files waited, ready to speak, if they lived long enough to listen. Rourke didn't stop running until the alley bent into darkness and swallowed the fleeing shadow whole. The echo of footsteps scattered, faded, and disappeared beneath the hum of the city's industrial heart. He scanned the rooftops. Nothing. Whoever the shooter was, they were trained. Clean exit, no hesitation. Back at the warehouse, Claire knelt beside Trimble's body, jaw clenched, hands bloodied. She didn't look up when Rourke returned. "We need the film," she said. "And we need to disappear." Rourke nodded, scanning the cabinets. They gathered the most incriminating files, the names, the negatives, and the copy of the Jan 10th reel. Claire found an envelope marked for debt. Rourke in Trimble's back pocket. No stamp, no seal. Inside was a photo. Elizabeth at the Florentine, dancing with a man whose face had been burned away by a cigarette. She stared at it. He knew this was coming. They left through the back, winding into the train yard behind the warehouse. Boxcars stood silent in the fog, like animals at rest. Rourke's pulse throbbed in his ears. "Where now?" Claire asked. "Safe house. Old informant's place. Highland Park." They drove in silence. The files lay between them like a ticking bomb. The safe house was a one-room studio above a shuttered bookstore. Dust hung in the air. A rusted cot leaned against the far wall. Rourke bolted the door. Claire drew the blinds. By lamplight, they laid out the evidence. The ledger's entries had grown in meaning. Names, once meaningless now, screamed with context. D.A. Klein's signature appeared 3 times next to cash drops. Hayes signed off on false statements filed on January 16, 2 days after Elizabeth's body was found. And Varnett, his initials matched coded payments to a shell corporation called Aurelia Holdings. Claire opened a drawer. Inside, a radio. She switched it on, keeping the volume low. Classical jazz drifted in, half static. Rourke sighed. "The reel. We need to watch it." The projector took 10 minutes to coax to life. When the image hit the wall, they watched in silence. Elizabeth appeared again, this time seated in the Florentine's private room, surrounded by men in dark suits. Glasses clinked. Laughter rang out. A man whispered in her ear. Her smile faltered. "Varnett." He took her hand, led her through the curtain. Then the camera cut. Static. Silence. Claire's voice was hoarse. "We're in over our heads." Rourke didn't answer. He stood, walked to the window, stared out over the sleeping city. "We finish this," he said. "We finish it for her." That night, the door rattled. 3 sharp knocks. Rourke pulled his gun. Claire stood beside him. A voice. "Rourke. Devlin. You're not safe." The door opened slowly. A man stepped in, tall, gray suit, eyes like ice. "Name's Mason," he said. He dropped a badge and a file on the table. "You're investigating a case we've been trying to bury for 8 years. Claire opened the file. Inside, photographs, matching theirs, reports, blacked out names, and one final warning typed on crisp white paper. "You have 5 days to drop this case. After that, we drop you." Rourke didn't speak as he shut the door behind Agent Mason. The floor creaked under the agent's polished shoes as he disappeared down the hallway. The silence he left behind was heavier than any threat. Claire sat on the cot, flipping through the FBI file. "They're scared," she said. "They don't send a ghost like Mason unless they're desperate." Rourke poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a chipped glass and handed it to her. "Desperate men are dangerous." And so are we. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. What now? We used the time we've got. 5 days. They made a list. 3 names, Varnett, Hayes, and Klein. 3 institutions. The DA's office, LAPD internal records, and the old Florentine property deed. Hayes is the weak link, Claire said. He's retired. No official cover anymore. If he knows what's in those files, he's already looking over his shoulder. Rourke nodded. Then we pay him a visit. Captain Lawrence Hayes lived in a Spanish-style bungalow up in Laurel Canyon. The yard was overgrown, the mailbox stuffed with junk. A cat watched them from a cracked windowsill. Claire knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. A shuffle. Then the door creaked open. Hayes looked older than his photographs. White stubble, eyes bleary, bathrobe cinched over a faded LAPD tee. "Detectives," he said, voice raw. "Rourke? Devlin. We're reopening the Elizabeth Short case." His face didn't move. "Can't help you." "You knew her," Rourke said. Hayes looked away. "Lot of people knew her." Claire stepped forward. "She was your daughter, wasn't she?" That stopped him. His knuckles whitened on the doorframe. "You should leave." Rourke stepped into the doorway. "We know what was happening at the Florentine. We have the film. We have names. And if we go down, a dozen copies go out to the press." Hayes stared at him, then sighed. He let them in. The living room was cluttered. Papers, old photos, empty bottles. Hayes poured coffee but didn't offer. "She was mine, but no one could know. Her mother, she had other plans. I was a young officer, unmarried, and she was a scandal waiting to happen." He sank into a recliner. "She came back to LA in '46. Wanted to be close. I tried to help quietly. Got her work. Steered her away from trouble. She found the club," Claire said. Hayes nodded. "I warned her. Told her not to dig. She thought she could fix it. Make them pay." "And Varnett?" Rourke asked. "He ran the operation. Had dirt on everyone. Elizabeth saw him escort a girl out the back. That girl never came back." Claire showed him the ledger. "Your signature's here." Hayes didn't blink. "They forced me. Threatened her. If I didn't play along, she'd vanish. But it didn't matter. They did it anyway." He looked at them. "I've lived in this coffin for 8 years. You want a confession? Fine. I'm guilty of silence." He pulled a key from around his neck. "Safety deposit box. Glendale Bank. You want the rest of the story? It's in there." Back at the safe house, Rourke held the key like it was an artifact. "Tomorrow," Claire said. "We go early." "Yeah," Rourke said, eyes still on the key. "And then we bring this to light." She looked at him. "If we live long enough." The bank opened at 9. Rourke and Claire were already parked 2 blocks away before the sun rose. A thick marine layer smothered the sky, wrapping the streets in pale gray light. It was the kind of morning that carried the scent of damp pavement and distant thunder. Claire adjusted the revolver beneath her coat. Rourke sipped stale coffee and scanned the street through the windshield. "We go in calm," he said. "Friendly. No alarms, no attention." Claire smirked. "You always say that before we end up drawing fire." Rourke grinned without humor. "Let's break the streak." The Glendale First Trust and Safe was nestled between a diner and a shoe store, ordinary on the outside but built like a fortress. The teller recognized Rourke's badge and made the call. 10 minutes later, they were led down a marble corridor to the vault. The air grew cooler, more sterile. The security guard was bored. The clerk was polite. Neither cared what was in box. The moment the brass lid lifted, the air changed. Inside were 4 mantle folders, a rolled film reel, 2 cassette recordings, and a sealed envelope marked, "To be opened only if I'm gone." Claire passed Rourke the envelope. He hesitated, then tore it open. A letter, in Hayes' handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm either dead or too far gone to help. The documents inside this box are the last clean copy. Everything else has been scrubbed or seized. You'll find the full list, names, deeds, payouts, and a confession from 1948 that never made it to court. It names the killer. Not the one who held the knife, but the one who gave the order. Elizabeth was trying to bring it here the night they found her. Claire opened the first folder. Inside were photographs. Elizabeth. Others, scenes from parties and studio lots. Some marked with red grease pencil. A date. Jan. The second folder held typewritten statements. Rourke scanned the names. Several had been killed since '47. A few were still in power. Claire's voice was tight. These aren't just witnesses. This is a map. This is how they moved money. Buried bodies, bought silence. The third folder was different. One page. A name. A crime. Malcolm Burnett ordered execution of Elizabeth Short to preserve Florentine ledger. Witness list. Delivery intercepted. Body posed to distract press. Rourke's jaw clenched. Claire stared at the page. He didn't just cover it up. He orchestrated it. The last folder contained something else. A newspaper clipping from 1949. D.A. Klein, promoted to federal judge. Below it, a photograph, Klein, Varnett, and Hayes shaking hands over a courthouse ribbon. Son of a bitch, Rourke muttered. He rolled the film, pocketed the cassettes. We take this public, Claire said. They'll shut it down before ink hits paper. Then we make it impossible to ignore. Rourke glanced at her. You ready to burn the city down? Claire's smile was thin. Been holding the match for years. They returned to the safe house just past noon, sun now breaking through the clouds with blinding clarity. Rourke stood by the window, scanning the street for tails. Claire spread the folders across the table again, the weight of the city pressing into her shoulders. Who do we trust with this? She asked, barely above a whisper. No one, Rourke said flatly. Not a single goddamn soul in this city. But we can't just sit on it. He turned. We go wide, broad and fast. Multiple press outlets. Anonymous tips. A radio station. Maybe two. One paper gets hit. The rest carry the fire. Claire flipped through the cassettes. One of these is an audio confession. Hayes or someone else. Could be leverage. Could be our bullet. We need a studio, Rourke muttered. Somewhere neutral. Untraceable. Claire dug through a drawer. There's a guy I used to work with. Broadcast technician. He runs late-night jazz on KRRC. Low wattage. Studio's downtown. He owes me. Rourke nodded. Set it up. That night, they met Benny Russo behind the studio, thin, jittery, with hair slicked back and cigarette always burning. He let them in through the service door. Claire, he grinned. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. Last time I did, you clocked a cop in the mouth. Deserved it, she muttered. Benny led them into the booth. Soundproof, dim, walls, lined with egg crate foam and jazz posters. What are we doing here? He asked. Claire handed him the tape. We need a clean feed. High gain. No traceable signature. Broadcast it, loop it, send it across 3 states if you can. Benny raised an eyebrow. This sounds like trouble. It is, Rourke said. And it's righteous. They prepped the reel-to-reel. Benny ran a test. The hiss of the machine filled the silence. Claire looked to Rourke. You sure you want to go on mic? He nodded. It's my voice. My case. My responsibility. At midnight, the red light flicked on. Rourke leaned into the mic. This is Detective Jack Rourke of the Los Angeles Police Department. What you're about to hear is not official. It's not cleared. It's not sanctioned. But it is the truth. He paused, steadying his voice. 8 years ago, Elizabeth Short was murdered. You know her as the Black Dahlia. You've seen the photos, heard the theories. But what you haven't heard is why. He laid it out. The Florentine Club. The payoffs. The silence. The film. The names. Then he hit play. Hayes' voice crackled through the room, haunted, tired, damning. He named Varnett, described the threats, detailed the meeting, the moment Elizabeth confronted them, the moment they decided she had to disappear. When the tape ended, Rourke spoke once more. This isn't the end. It's the start. If you're hearing this, make copies. Send them. Call your papers. Shine a light so bright. Even the devil has to squint. He signed off. Benny sat frozen, wide-eyed. Holy hell, Claire exhaled. That's how you burn the city down. The morning after the broadcast felt like waking up in someone else's city. It was quiet. Too quiet. Not in sound, but in motion. No headlines, no sirens, no official denial. Claire tapped her fingers against the rim of a mug. They're not going to react publicly. Not yet. They're regrouping, calculating. Rourke nodded. They'll let the fire burn a little, see if it snuffs itself out. Then they'll start the cleanup. Across the city, phones were ringing. Papers receiving unmarked packages. Anonymous tips pouring in. Reporters waking up to stories they never thought they'd print. By midday, KROC's broadcast tower went silent. Static. Rourke and Claire stood on the rooftop, watching two black sedans crawl past the intersection below. Time to disappear, Rourke muttered. Claire didn't argue. She grabbed her bag, the files, the negatives. They moved like professionals, fast, clean, careful. The next safe house was a cabin in Topanga Canyon. No phone, no neighbors, just trees, wind, and the low hum of anticipation. That night, the fire started. Not metaphorical, real. A warehouse downtown. The one that held records from the Florentine shell companies. Gone in 3 hours. Claire read the wire from a payphone near the canyon. Warehouse blaze tied to possible arson. No survivors reported. Rourke rubbed his jaw. They're erasing the past. But not everything. Claire held up the reel. We've still got the truth. They knew it was only a matter of time. Before someone came looking, before a knock came that wasn't friendly. Rourke began assembling duplicates, photos, film, voice clips, packaged into envelopes marked with dead man's switches. Instructions for newspapers. One for a lawyer he trusted. One for Claire's brother in Seattle. We don't get to hide, Claire said that night. Not forever. No, Rourke replied. But we get to make damn sure they never forget. Somewhere in the hills above Los Angeles, a red light flickered. A man picked up a phone. Confirmed. They're still moving. Yes, I understand. I'll handle it. He hung up. The silence that followed was not peace. It was the kind that comes before something breaks. The next morning, the front page of the Los Angeles Courier read, "Who was the Black Dahlia? Detective claims cover-up." Small headline. Below the fold, no photographs. Just 3 paragraphs, and an editorial buried on page 9. Claire tossed the paper across the table. They buried it, but not all of it, Rourke said. Enough to start the whispers. He flipped through other papers. One ran a blurry still from the broadcast. Another quoted an unnamed source. Pieces were moving, slow and shaky. Benny Russo was gone. Radio station gutted. Equipment smashed. Office locked. No sign of a struggle, but no sign of Benny either. Claire's jaw clenched. That was a message. They left Topanga by nightfall, avoiding major roads. Rourke knew they couldn't wait anymore. The city was turning into a minefield, and the next step might blow everything wide. They stopped at a payphone on Sunset. Claire called a contact in the press, someone who'd run stories when no one else would. Maria Ortega, she said. The Southland Post. If anyone will risk it, she will. An hour later, they met Maria in the back of a diner in Eagle Rock. She was sharp, fearless, with eyes that saw everything twice. Claire handed her the dossier, the reel, the confession. You're going to want protection, Rourke warned. Maria laughed dryly. Protections for people who plan to stop. She flipped through the photos, her face unreadable. You two just declared war on the city's spine, she said. We didn't start the war, Claire answered. We're just done letting them win it. Maria nodded once. Give me 48 hours. I'll print something they can't ignore. They left the diner in silence. Rain had begun to fall again. Soft. Relentless. Like it knew what was coming. Maria Ortega was true to her word. 48 hours later, the Southland Post ran the story front and center. Full-page headline: The Truth Beneath Los Angeles, the Black Dahlia, Power and Silence. Below it, 3 bylines, 2 photographs, and 1 name in bold: Elizabeth Short. Claire and Rourke stood in front of a newsstand at dawn, copies flying off the shelves faster than the vendor could stack them. "Think it'll hold?" Claire asked. "No," Rourke replied. "But it'll hurt." The city buzzed. Phones rang off desks. Court clerks lost sleep. D.A. Klein issued a 1-line denial. Senator Vernet canceled a scheduled appearance in Sacramento. Claire scanned the column. Ortega had published everything: dates, photos, Hayes's confession, even stills from the film. Then the phone calls began. First, an anonymous tip about a judge resigning. Second, a clerk from the DA's office, willing to talk. Third, a letter delivered by hand to the post, containing detailed bank statements linking Klein to Aurelia Holdings. By sundown, the dam was cracking, but pressure cuts both ways. That night, Claire's car was torched. No one hurt, but the message was loud. Rourke paced the perimeter of the cabin, revolver holstered tight, eyes scanning the tree line. "They're not going to stop," he said. Claire didn't flinch. "Neither are we." The next morning brought a heavier blow. Maria was gone, her apartment empty. Phone disconnected. Neighbors saw men in suits. No badge numbers, no IDs, just a clean sweep. The paper still ran, but the editor published a statement. "Lead journalist Maria Ortega is on leave. We cannot comment further." Claire slammed the paper on the table. They got to her. Rourke looked out the window. "Then we get louder." They had 1 shot left. The last reel. The last full-length footage from the Florentine, uncut, unedited. They'd planned to keep it buried, but plans were for people with time. They didn't have any left. They set the projector up in the back of a mechanic's shop in Glassell Park, an old favor called in by Rourke to a man who used to build car bombs for the Navy. Grease-streaked walls. The smell of oil and steel. A screen strung between 2 tool racks. Claire sat cross-legged on a paint-stained bench, notebook in hand. Rourke loaded the reel. "This is it," he said. "After this, we don't get to walk away." "I wasn't planning to," she said. The reel clicked to life. Light flickered. On screen, the Florentine. Crisp this time. No blur, no cuts. Just long, brutal clarity. Laughter, drinks, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns, Varnet at the center. Elizabeth entered the frame, smiling, unaware. The reel didn't stop. A back room. A hand on her shoulder. A whispered exchange. Then the expressions changed. Hers first, then theirs. Someone reached for the camera. The footage jolted. Recovered. A scuffle. Screams off screen. Then black. Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That's not just scandal," she said. "That's murder in motion." Rourke nodded. "And it's about to be public." They duplicated the reel. 3 copies. 1 for a contact in Chicago. 1 for an underground wire service. 1 hand-delivered to a contact at the San Francisco Chronicle. By the time the sun rose, it was out of their hands. And the city was out of time. 2 days later, the city began to fracture. It wasn't 1 event, it was 10. A cascade, a movement. Quiet at first, then loud. 1 TV station leaked stills from the Florentine film. A rival paper ran the transcript of Hayes's confession word for word. Editorials ignited. Anonymous op-eds lit fuses beneath City Hall. And still no arrests, no press conferences, just silence. Until the protest. It started on Temple Street. 50 people. Then 200. Then thousands. Placards. Shouts. Whistles. A crowd that pulsed with something LA hadn't seen since the war. Claire and Rourke stood at the edge, watching history unfold from the back of a diner booth. "They're finally listening," she said. "They're finally mad," Rourke corrected. "There's a difference." A man entered the diner. Clean suit. Sunglasses. Sat 2 booths down. Claire noticed first. Tail? Yeah. They exited through the back, slipping into alley shadows. They didn't go far. A safe room above a record store in Silver Lake, Rourke's last ace. From there, they watched the news roll in. By evening, Varnett had gone to ground. Klein issued a formal statement of resignation. Hayes, already vanished, was officially declared a missing person. The dominoes weren't just falling, they were crashing. Claire loaded a pistol. "We're next." "Probably. You scared?" "No," Rourke said. "But I'm not done either." That night, a knock came at the door. Not the sharp rap of a threat, but a knock that carried weight. A woman stood outside. Mid-50s, glasses, neat suit, federal badge. "My name is Eleanor Dunn," she said. "I'm with the Justice Department." Claire didn't speak. Rourke stepped forward. "You here to shut us down?" "No," Dunn said. "I'm here to finish what Elizabeth started." Eleanor Dunn didn't flinch in the dim hallway. She handed Claire a folder before stepping inside the room. Her movements were careful, practiced, like someone who'd spent years walking tightropes in political storms. Rourke shut the door and locked it. Dunn sat without invitation. "You exposed something that's been festering for decades. Now it's out, and they'll do anything to sew it back shut." Claire opened the folder. Inside were classified briefings, interagency memos, transcripts stamped redacted, but enough remained to confirm it. Dunn had been tracking Aurelia Holdings since The financial tentacles reached beyond California. Federal judges, cabinet officials, intelligence ties. "Why now?" Rourke asked. "Because your broadcast made it impossible to ignore," Dunn replied. "Because Elizabeth Short was just the first victim in a string of political murders we never had proof for. Until now." Claire narrowed her eyes. "So what's the plan?" "I can get you in front of a federal panel off the record. Witness protection is on the table. Immunity too. But we need a formal testimony. Names, timelines, everything." Rourke shook his head. "No backrooms. No silence. This goes public." Dunn hesitated. "You do that, and you won't survive the month." Claire looked at Rourke. "We've already survived more than we were supposed to." He nodded. "We want it on record. On tape. We go in with copies and demand hearings. Live." Dunn didn't smile, but her eyes flashed. "You've got stones, detective." The next morning, they met Dunn at the federal courthouse in downtown L.A. A makeshift press cordon waited outside. Rumors had begun circulating. Rourke wore his badge. Claire wore black. Inside, in a closed chamber, they laid it all out. Names, events, witnesses, the ledger, the films, the tapes. 2 hours later, the panel recessed. Claire and Rourke stood alone in the marble hallway. They'd done what they could. Now the question was whether the system would finally do its part. Eleanor Dunn approached. She held up a sheet of paper. "Subpoenas are being drafted. Arrest warrants will follow." Rourke took the paper, stared at the names listed. Varnett, Klein. 3 others they hadn't known were even involved. "Hell of a thing," Claire murmured. Dunn added, "You should get out of town. Just for a while." Rourke looked up. "Where?" "Anywhere there's no cameras," she said. "Because come tomorrow morning you'll both be heroes or targets, possibly both." The news broke like a dam. By morning, every major paper in the country had picked up the story. The names, the ledger, the tapes. Even conservative networks couldn't ignore it anymore. Varnett's mansion in Bel Air was surrounded by protesters. Klein's office was shuttered. Federal agents moved in on Aurelia Holdings offices from New York to San Diego. Claire watched the coverage from a motel off Highway 1. Static hummed on the screen between segments. Her cigarette burned low in the ashtray. Rourke returned from the gas station with black coffee and a bag full of road maps. "They raided the club," he said. "Florentines officially condemned." "Too late for Elizabeth," Claire muttered. "Not too late for everyone else." A knock on the door. They both reached for their weapons, but it was done. She stepped in, sunglasses off, hair pulled back. "It's done," she said. "The hearings are going public. You'll be called to testify again. This time under full protection." Rourke poured her a cup of coffee. "We still got targets on our backs?" Dunn nodded. "But the tide is turning. Internal Affairs is opening an inquiry into Hayes' old division. Congress is calling for a formal investigation." Claire looked up. "And Elizabeth? We're recommending full exoneration and an official apology to her family. The case will be closed. The real story, archived forever." Rourke laughed, dry. "Only took 8 years, 5 bodies, and burning half the city." Dunn stood. "Justice is slow, detective. But when it moves hard." She left. That night, Rourke and Claire stood on the cliffs above the ocean. The wind off the Pacific was cold but clean. "She deserved better," Claire whispered. "She got the truth," Rourke said. "That's more than most." They stood in silence, the sound of the waves echoing the noise of a city finally beginning to change. The Black Dahlia was no longer just a name in a file. She was a symbol, and symbols never really die. The following week, the city breathed differently. The press kept digging, peeling back the layers of corruption with each new byline. Late-night talk shows, editorials, independent newsletters. Everyone had a take. For the first time in nearly a decade, the name Elizabeth Short wasn't whispered in shame. It rang with justice. A memorial was held at Angeles Rosedale Cemetery. Small crowd, no cameras, no speeches, just a circle of those who remembered her not as a headline, but as a girl with bright eyes and dreams too big for the time she lived in. Claire laid a single white lily on the grave. Rourke placed a folded news clipping beside it, the front page declaring the case closed. "Do you think she'd have wanted this?" Claire asked. Rourke nodded slowly. "I think she'd have wanted to be seen. And now she is." They stayed until the sun dipped behind the palms. That night, they returned to the motel, not to hide, but to rest. For the first time in weeks, the television stayed off. Claire flipped through her notebook while Rourke wrote in longhand. A knock came just after midnight. Neither reached for a weapon. Instead, Rourke opened the door. It was a teenager, wide-eyed, winded, clutching a manila envelope. This came to my house. It's for you," he said. Claire took it, brow furrowed. Inside, photographs. New ones, dated the previous week. A woman strikingly similar to Elizabeth meeting a man in a suit. Another ledger. A different logo. Rourke looked at Claire. "Same story," he said. "Different cover." She closed the envelope. "Looks like the shadows aren't finished with us yet." Rourke smiled grimly. "Then neither are we." The photos were clearer than they should have been. Not surveillance shots posed, framed, almost staged. The woman in them wasn't Elizabeth Short, but she could have been her sister. Claire laid them out on the motel desk, comparing the features. "They're leaning into the echo," she murmured. "Someone wants us to see the pattern." Rourke flipped open the ledger. The logo said Lydian Trust. Another shell. Another front. Another name. The transactions followed the same rhythm as Aurelia Holdings. High-dollar transfers, silent clients. All tied to a building in San Francisco. A luxury hotel turned private club. Claire pulled out her map. "You thinking road trip?" "I'm thinking we've already started it." They checked out by sunrise. The drive north felt different. No chase behind them. No heat on their heels. But the silence now between towns, between words, was heavier. Claire kept the radio off. Rourke drove with one hand on the wheel, the other scribbling thoughts on a cigarette pack. By midday they reached the city. San Francisco loomed gray and crisp against the coast. The air tasted cleaner, but only just. They found the hotel on Post Street, the Averline. Private, exclusive, a marble lobby with gold trim and security that watched you breathe. Rourke walked past first. Claire circled from the alley. By nightfall, they'd seen enough. Guests who didn't belong. Cars without plates. Deliveries logged, but never opened. And one name that kept appearing on the sign-in logs, M. Varnett, Jr. Claire looked at him. The son? Or the ghost? Rourke pulled his coat tighter. Either way, we knock tomorrow. Chapter 22, The Club. They came back just before dawn, dressed like guests, not investigators. Claire wore a navy trench, her hair swept into a sharp knot. Rourke had shaved, his face clean and unreadable. They looked like people who belonged rich, bored, faceless. The Averline's valet took the keys without a second glance. Inside, the lobby glowed under Art Deco chandeliers. Music drifted from a hidden speaker. Behind the reception desk, a woman smiled too tightly. "We're expected," Claire said. Rourke handed over a name from the ledger, one they knew didn't exist anymore. Still, the receptionist checked it against the guest list, nodded once, and passed them a silver key card. Suite 6. The hallway upstairs was all plush carpet and dim sconces. Claire's heels were silent. Rourke scanned every door. Suite 6114 wasn't a suite at all. It was a private stairwell. At the bottom, a door, steel-lined fingerprint scanner. A bell. Claire rang it. 30 seconds passed. Then it opened. A man answered. Late 30s, tailored suit, hair slicked too perfectly. His face was familiar, a resemblance they didn't miss. "M. Varnett, Jr.," Claire said. He didn't deny it. Just stepped aside. Inside, the walls were covered in oil paintings. Women, all the same woman. Variations, twists, echoes. "You know why we're here," Rourke said. Varnett Jr. poured whiskey. "Didn't offer. My father made enemies," he said. "And money. And mistakes." Claire stepped forward. "You're laundering for the same network. Rebuilding it, using the same pattern. You think this city ever changes?" he asked. "My father was a fool. He tried to control it. I just ride the wave." Rourke pulled out the photo. "Who is she?" Varnett Jr. smiled. "A model. Hired her myself, paid her well. Didn't break any laws." "Not yet," Claire said. "But it's starting again." "Not starting," he said. "Continuing." He handed them a file. Inside, photos, contracts, checks. Everything clean. Too clean. "I know who you are. What you did," Varnett Jr. said. "You burned the old forest, but roots survive." Claire stared at him. Not for long. She turned. Rourke followed. At the stairwell door, Varnett Jr. called out, "You want to stop it? Then you better be ready to burn again." Claire drove while Rourke scanned the file Varnett Jr. had handed over. It was neat, organized, sanitized. Too neat. "This guy thinks he's untouchable," Rourke muttered. Everything wrapped in legal threads, paperwork airtight. Claire didn't take her eyes off the road. But every perfect lie leaves a fingerprint. They headed back to the motel. Before the sun set, Claire contacted a former IRS agent she'd worked with during a racketeering case. Within the hour, he confirmed what they suspected. Lydian Trust was a shell, but it moved money through 6 international accounts. One of them flagged recently by Treasury. Claire sat on the bed, rubbing her temples. They're testing the waters, seeing how far they can go before they get noticed. Rourke circled one name in the documents, one they hadn't seen before. "Colton Vance," he said aloud. "Real estate, campaign fund donor, several million moved through offshore trusts." Claire's eyes narrowed. New money, trying to buy old power. They made a plan. Dig deep, move fast, and if possible, cut it off at the source. That night, they tracked Vance's location to a high-profile gala in Sausalito. The event was invitation only, political donors, foreign investors, and a few faces from LA's darker corners. Claire stepped into a dress she hadn't worn since undercover days. Rourke straightened his tie with fingers that didn't shake. By midnight, they'd slipped inside. The party shimmered, wealth and ambition and danger coiled beneath champagne toasts. Vance was there, tall, polished, and charming. A man building a kingdom from the ashes of another. Rourke whispered, "Time to find out if he's planting new roots, or just watering old blood." They didn't confront Vance at the gala. Not yet. Rourke watched him from the shadows of the ballroom, how he moved, who he touched, which whispers drew his interest. Claire danced with a junior senator from Nevada just to stay in orbit. They pieced the social map quickly. Vance wasn't at the top, but he had access. Everyone who mattered shook his hand. Everyone who mattered deferred just a little. The file they'd found back at the motel didn't lie. Vance was building a structure, quiet, invisible, legal on paper, but every beam of it was laid with money from buried names and burned ledgers. At midnight, Vance stepped out for a smoke. Rourke followed. Claire flanked wide, near the valet line. "Mr. Vance," Rourke said, lighting his own cigarette. Vance turned slowly. "Detective Rourke." "That's bold." Rourke exhaled. "So is trying to resurface an empire that got buried under federal fire." "I call it recycling," Vance replied. "You can't destroy the market. You can't destroy the market. You just change the label." Claire stepped in from the side. "And the bodies? Do they get new labels too?" Vance didn't blink. "You're confusing me with my predecessors." "But you're following their blueprint," Rourke said. "Same methods, same money, same silence." Vance crushed the cigarette beneath a polished shoe. "Then I suggest you enjoy the night. Because the system doesn't punish what it can't define." Rourke leaned closer. "We've defined you, Vance, and the line's getting very short." Vance smiled. "Then I guess I'll see you in court." He turned, stepped into a waiting car, and vanished into the fog. Claire exhaled. "He's daring us." "Then let's accept." They left Sausalito with new targets, new evidence, and a file ready for Eleanor Dunn. The war wasn't over, but it had a new front. Eleanor Dunn met them in a diner on the edge of the Presidio. She wore no makeup, a borrowed raincoat, and the wear of too many sleepless nights. She slid into the booth across from them, nodding at the manila folder Rourke handed over. "Vance is sloppy," Claire said, sipping coffee. "But he thinks he's untouchable." Dunn opened the folder. "He's arrogant. That's different. Arrogance leaves trails." She skimmed the contents. Wire transfers, surveillance logs, contact lists with enough red flags to line a parade route. "We'll move on this," Dunn said, voice low. "But, quietly, the Justice Department doesn't want another public firestorm, not yet." Rourke leaned in. "We need pressure, not delay. You wait too long, and he fades." Dunn met his eyes. "We're already drafting charges, but we need one more thing. Something undeniable." Claire pulled a microcassette from her coat. "You mean this?" Dunn's eyes narrowed. "We bugged Vance's car," Claire said. "Got him talking about the money, about rebuilding what his father lost. He even mentioned the Black Dahlia, called it a cautionary tale." Dunn smiled for the first time in days. "That'll do." She stood, slid the folder into her coat. "You'll both need to go dark. For a while." Rourke paid the check. 2 weeks later, federal agents swarmed the Everline Hotel. Colton Vance was arrested at the rooftop bar, a glass of champagne in hand, and a smirk still curling the edge of his lips. The charges were made public within the hour. Money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy. One line buried deep in the indictment: obstruction in connection with the murder of Elizabeth Short. Rourke and Claire didn't watch the news. They were already gone. No one knew where. But the message was clear. Some ghosts don't fade. Some justice takes decades. And some stories keep writing themselves. The wind moved gently through the trees above the hills of Laurel Canyon. Somewhere far off, a siren echoed and faded into silence. A letter arrived at the Los Angeles Public Library, addressed simply to the archives. Inside were two things: a copy of the original broadcast transcript, a photograph of Elizabeth Short smiling, untouched by history. There was no return address. Years passed, buildings rose, old ones fell, faces changed, and names did too. But the Black Dahlia remained. Not just in headlines, not just in horror, but in the spaces where truth hides, in file boxes, behind locked doors, in voices too tired to speak. Until someone listens. Because there are stories that don't fade. Only people who stop asking. And as long as someone does, Elizabeth Short's name will never disappear.